The 2018 Commonwealth Innovation Forum, brought to you by Destination Gold Coast.
And now I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Alan Finkel AO. He is the Chief Scientist of Australia and he's going to provide for us an Australian perspective on innovation. Please welcome Dr. Finkel.
Well, wasn't that an extraordinary welcome to country by Marucci? I've seen a lot of them, but it's the first one I've heard in song. And I too would like to pay my respects to her elders past and present. I look around this room and I'm delighted to see many friends and innovation champions. And in particular, I would like to thank Dr. Muscat for his speech. I learnt something I didn't realise, that the Commonwealth is bigger than I thought. A third of the world's population, and it's true that our success will be through collaborative innovation, which will keep us ahead of the game. Just in anticipation of this, I looked up a little bit about Malta, and I discovered that Malta is home to perhaps the oldest freestanding structures in the world, the Neolithic temples that are older than the pyramids. And last year, Malta adopted a space policy. It's been an incredible 7,000 years for them. As we heard from Dr. Muscat, Malta has relied on innovation to ensure it's placed as an advanced economy despite its tiny land area. And Malta exhibits innovation in politics too. In my role, I usually deeply avoid making comments about politics. But I can't help but note that the innovative approach that the Maltese constitution takes to fairness. In Malta, if a party wins an absolute majority of the votes, but does not achieve a majority of the seats in Parliament, then that party is given extra seats to ensure their parliamentary majority. That's true innovation. And that's true innovation using my definition of innovation, which is doing things differently and doing them better. So I've been asked today to provide an Australian perspective on innovation. So I'm going to start in the most Australian way possible with a yarn, a story about sport. And it's a story in honour of the great Sir Roger Bannister, who passed away last month. So come with me back to the year 1954. No human being in all recorded history has ever run a mile in under 4 minutes. To beat that record, to beat 4 minutes would be the Mount Everest of sport, the barrier that they said could never be conquered. A young Briton named Roger Bannister nailed it in Oxford on May the 6th in 1954. But he did it with the assistance of a series of runners who were pacing him. A young Australian, John Landy, he smashed it in Finland on June the 21st, and this time unaided. And now both of them were heading to Vancouver to the 1954 Commonwealth Games to go head-to-head for the gold. The gun was fired. 100 million people listening on the radio held their collective breath. They were off. John Landy races to the lead. And as we all know, he won. Unless you count that final stretch of the race, when Landy turned his head just enough to see where Bannister was, and in that last desperate sprint down the home straight, well, yes, Roger Bannister passed him. So technically you could say that Roger Bannister won. But I told you this speech would be an Australian perspective on innovation. And as an Australian, I say, for our purposes, they both won. Sport won. We all won. Because both athletes did the impossible. They cracked the 4-minute mile. And the world looked on and cheered. So why tell that story? Because I can't talk about the cricket? Well, actually I've got two reasons. Reason number one, because that story is really a story about scientists. It's true. These two miracle milers were scientists first and athletes in their spare time. Roger Bannister was a medical student who became a neurologist, and in 1954 he published one of his first academic papers on the impact of oxygen on athletic performance. John Landy was an agricultural science student who became ultimately a research manager and a natural historian. He got his start in science chasing butterflies. Now, if you think that it's great to float like a butterfly, try running like a butterfly hunter. Up a mountain, in the outback, with a net, you couldn't help but get fit. So to all the boys and girls in the Commonwealth sitting in school today and dreaming of butterflies, dream also of the winner's podium at some distant Commonwealth Games, but stick to your science. So that was my first reason. Reason number two is that this is not just a story about scientists. It's a story about how difficult things get done. And so it's a story about innovation. Think of the things that we believed about human capability as late as 1950. Doctors and athletes said that it was impossible to run a 4-minute mile, literally impossible. Not just a psychological barrier, but a biological limit. The human body would break. The record today stands at 3 minutes and 43 seconds. And it's not because humans are born with more natural talent. I'm not here to debate the science of evolution, but trust me, millennials are not a different species. Humans have not evolved into a biologically different animal in the space of 60 years. No, athletes today run faster because people like Roger Bannister and John Landy worked out how, and they did it relentlessly. And in their story, I see all the key elements of innovation strategy writ large. In Australia, we crystallised those elements in the 2030 Plan for Australian Prosperity. This plan was developed by a body established by the Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, and the body is called Innovation and Science Australia. And as Chief Scientist, I'm privileged to serve as the Deputy Chair of that body. And we built that strategy for Australia with the benefit of insights from many countries, including the countries represented here today. So, with that lens, here's how I read the Bannister and Landy story. And it starts with aspiration. Like all elite athletes, Bannister and Landy, they wanted to win. Not just at the club level, not just at the national level, but at the international level. They wanted to stand at the podium at the Commonwealth Games with a faster time than any human being in history had ever run. And so they fought for every fraction of a second. They ran through sickness and, in John Landy's case, ran through injury. Landy stepped on a broken glass in the days before the big race in Vancouver. So they stitched him up and he got on with the job. You need that fire and determination to be globally competitive. Not just good, but to be the best. But aspiration is not enough. The next essential ingredient is education. Great athletes seek out great coaches. They know that talent doesn't trump technique. Whatever your natural advantages, you have to start young, listen up, knuckle down. And John Landy in particular was well ahead of the game. He studied many different training regimes under several great coaches. With their help, he worked out a lot of the best practice principles that elite runners swear by today. He just did it 6 decades early. People still study his training regime. It was that good. But John Landy would tell them they have to do more than just study it. They have to push beyond it. And for that, you need science and technology, which is the third essential element. Personally, I think about sport like an engineer. It's just physics and biology. Everything else is marketing. The key is the efficient conversion of energy to output. Training helps you to calibrate the machine. But science and technology help you to change the equation. For example, running shoes. In ancient Greece, you ran barefoot. Then athletes started showing up in leather sandals, and those athletes would win. Lesson learned? Humans run faster in shoes. The Romans added spikes. Of course the Romans added spikes. Then came the Dark Ages, and nothing much happened in sports shoe innovation for the next 18 centuries. In the 19th century, we got runners made out of rubber and canvas. In the 1930s, we got cushions and side supports. In the 1970s, we got Nike Air. And Nike got the air from NASA. A NASA engineer was working on lightweight space helmets when he came up with the idea of using similar techniques to put a pad of interconnected air cells into running shoes. And Nike was sold on the idea. Today, we've got customised 3D printed spike plates, polymer soles, and nanomesh uppers. The point is, we would still be running in leather sandals if not for the scientists who invented new materials and the engineers who turned them into shoes. And the final element after aspiration, education, and science and technology is data. Data to scrutinise your performance, data to make yourself accountable, and data to work out how to improve. It wouldn't be sport without statistics. And to the fans, that might be trivia, but to the athletes, it's pure gold. Now, Australians know that we can bring all these elements together in sport. And that's why we get so angry when we lose. The ingoing assumption is that we ought to win. When we came home from the Montreal Olympics in 1976 without a single gold medal, it was a national crisis. We stopped kidding ourselves that talent and a bit of grit was all that it takes. It just wasn't enough. Not when our competitors were approaching sport as a national priority. So we set out to beat them fair and square. We said we could do it, and so we did. We rolled out the Life Be In It campaign. Lesson from the Soviets, mass participation in sport. We put funding into sports facilities and scholarships. Lesson from the Americans, invest in elite education. We built high-performance programs combining excellence in science with excellence in coaching. Lesson from industry, project management. And we hit a gold streak. And then we hit a second gold streak, selling our winning strategies to our competitors. That's sport. You've got to keep raising your game. You can look at the global rankings today. Out of all the sports science programs in the world's universities, 10 of the top 50 are found in Australia, and 2 of them are right here in Queensland. So from our Montreal moment in sport, we learned and we acted. If we can do it in sport, then we ought to be able to do it across the economy. The challenge is to do it without a Montreal moment, because we are now in our 27th year of continuous economic growth, and we do not want to break that streak. Many Australians like to say that we've been lucky, but where we've succeeded, we've also been smart. Look at mining. We are home to some of the most advanced mining sites in the world. Yes, we're lucky to have rocks in the ground, but we're smart to get them out of the ground with self-driving trucks and remotely controlled drills. That's innovation. You just don't see it if your personal definition of innovation is limited to startups in big cities. For a truly high-performing economy, we need to think differently, to recognise innovation in all of its forms, and to push for it in every industrial sector, including traditional ones. Let me give you a couple of examples from Queensland. Every Australian knows the Queensland slogan, beautiful one day, perfect the next. This is a state with a reputation for making good things even better. So I'm going to give you two things that you would think could never be made any better. And they're being made better in Queensland. One, bananas, and two, sunshine. Bananas. This story comes from the Queensland University of Technology. In developing countries like Uganda, vitamin A deficiency is a serious problem. And around the world, up to 500,000 children go blind every year through a lack of vitamin A. A staple part of the diet in Uganda is the East African highland cooking banana. It's high in starch, but it's very low in vitamin A. So Queensland researchers, with the support of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, saw a golden opportunity to boost the banana. They took the big yellow Cavendish bananas that we love so much in Australia, and they inserted a gene from a Melanesian variety that is naturally high in provitamin A, but only grows in small bunches. Bingo, a high-yield, vitamin A-rich banana, now in field trials in Australia and Uganda. With the added bonus of knowledge transfer, thanks to the Ugandan students who came out to Australia to be part of the project and take back the technology. Great produce is a luxury that Australians take for granted, but agricultural technology is literally a way of harvesting our ideas. We have learned to farm in almost every sort of climate that nature can throw at us. And we can sell that expertise to the world just as we sell our value-added livestock and crops. That's innovation. Doing things differently and doing them better. So now take sunshine. Queensland has lots of it. So what to do with it? Make energy. One exciting project takes a disused gold mine up in the north. The plan by GenX Power is to build an integrated solar and pumped hydro energy hub. The solar farm will generate the energy to pump the water from the cavity at the bottom of the abandoned mine to a reservoir at the top. And when required, the water can be released to power the turbine and generate electricity. It's the new gold mine, solar backed up with storage. We've had our challenges in Australia with the transition of the electricity network. That's no secret. But Queensland has flagged its ambitions to compete in the global market for 21st century solutions. And I also think of the new electric superhighway, which is lined with charging stations. And you can now drive in your electric car 2,000 kilometres from the Gold Coast up to Cairns. And those charging stations, they're homegrown. They're Queensland technology from a Brisbane-based company named Tritium. And you won't just find Tritium charging stations in Queensland. They line the highways in the United States and Europe as well. So won't it be wonderful when Queensland Superhighway is a solar superhighway running on 21st century Queensland gold? Again, doing things differently and doing them better. Now, just as Queensland has captured its golden resources, the Board of Innovation and Science Australia has bottled the essence of Australian innovation into a 2030 plan for Australian prosperity. Its 5 imperatives across education, business, research, government and culture, they all map to the breakthrough innovations that I've mentioned in this speech. Learning never ceases. Innovation, it's a way of life. In Australia, in Malta, across the Commonwealth, throughout the ambitious nations of the world. So here's to the miracle milers, Sir Roger Bannister and John Landy. And I'll give the last word to Roger Bannister, the athlete who always won in the final moments of the race. And he said, "No one can say you must not run faster than this. No one can say you must not jump higher than that. The human spirit is indomitable." To which I say, hear, hear. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Finkel. Thank you, Dr. Works if it's turned on. Thank you very much. And can you please give Dr. Finkel another round of applause?
Thank you.
Can I put you on the spot and ask you a question?
You can. It wasn't in my brief, but I'm happy.
So, but you talk about aspiration, education, science and technology and data. Given the availability of data and the focus on that now, do you expect we're in the golden age of innovation now, that how far we can go now will be unmatched?
The answer is yes, for now. But no, if you ask me the same question 10 years from now, about now, innovation, it's on an exponential curve and you can't see the shape of the curve while you're experiencing it. But just think about the discoveries, the breakthroughs in the 50s and 60s in space and integrated circuits, the medical breakthroughs of the 70s and 80s. I think that innovation is an unstoppable process. Innovation is not one thing, it's the cumulative impact. National, global innovation is the cumulative impact of hundreds of thousands, millions of scientists and engineers and others around the world just inventing things, thinking things, always trying to not just do it differently, but to do it better. And I think of it as like a bubbling cauldron of innovation activity, but the surface level is rising at the same time as the bubbles are bubbling. It's ongoing.
So you and the Prime Minister of Malta talked about collaboration and the importance of that. How do we increase collaboration between innovators in different countries?
All the tools are there to maximise collaboration. It's the availability of data and it's the availability of communications modalities, and we have so many of them. It's really a question of recognising it and rewarding it. And I said both things because there is a tendency, actually in most countries, to look inwards and criticise that there's not enough collaboration. Partly, I think it's poorly collected. The data around collaboration is not accurate. In Australia, I would argue that there's a lot more collaboration than you would think. There's a famous statistic out there that says that Australia is the laggard in the world when it comes to collaboration between universities and industry. And I think when I started as chief scientist 2 years ago, I was meant to complain about that in all my public speeches. But what I found in the first couple of months is I'd go and visit a Deputy Vice-Chancellor of Research, the head of research at one university, another university or a medical research institute, and I'd talk to them and they were doing so much collaboration at their university. So I would say to them, why is it that the figure out there for Australia shows that we're so bad at collaboration? And they say, oh, it must be all the other universities. Well, the reality is we do collaborate a lot, but there are negative factors. So, for example, scholastic achievement is measured primarily by publications, which doesn't drive collaboration with industry or innovation. In Australia, we're introducing this year for the first time a new scholastic metric, which is based on outcomes and impacts, not just publications. And I think that will help to stimulate collaboration.
And last question, it's Commonwealth Games are going on just up the road. In terms of innovation, where would you put Australia on the dais?
I'd be guessing, but from all the effort we're putting in, I'd say that we're doing pretty well. Not just on technology, I think a lot of that comes out of America and other places, but in terms of sports psychology and training routines, I can say that we're doing very, very well.
Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together again for Dr. Finkel.
Thank you.
A drover's hat.
Oh,
we
thank you.
expect you to wear it with pride.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.